You're listening to the Karmic Mirror podcast, where we explore the wisdom tucked within the layers of the self-help world.
Together, we bridge the gap between esoteric teachings and practical tools for everyday life, with self-love and personal growth at the heart of each conversation.
Whether you're a seasoned seeker or just beginning your path, join us and uncover the magic within and around you.
Hello, Karmic Mirror listeners, and welcome to another Voice Note Files, where we are going to be talking about a topic that really lit me up yesterday, and I've had some full circle ahas in, and that topic is community. Welcome, Michelle. Hello, how are you today?
Hi everyone.
I think where I wanted to start, and again, just for our listeners jumping in, this is more of an episode where we mimic what conversations look like between Michelle and I in our voice notes. So, just kind of starting, Michelle, the theme of community has been coming up a lot for me lately. And I think the first place, I know our episode with Sarah felt really drawn back to that first community episode that we were talking about. And then, I remember our first community episode that we were talking about, and I had like another aha from then was like, I was talking about those birds in the park. Do you remember that story with the
Yeah,
lady?
of course. Yeah.
And I'm in that Held Healers group where it's women finding their soul's purpose and entrepreneurial spirits. And I did not even realize we had scheduled me and two women from that group scheduled to meet up, and we went for a walk, and I was walking in that exact same park. And it kind of just hit me, right? This is like a full, tangible, kind of full circle moment in community and just kind of how far we've come. And I think about you, and just since we started recording this episode, how much more ingrained you've gotten in your community and what that looks like as well. So
Yeah. I love it. Yeah, well, by the time this episode airs, maybe I think the Sarah Duncan episode will be out, so I hope you've listened to it. But to just go back to that, um, Sarah was the first person before Karmic Mirror even began. She was someone that we knew we wanted as a guest, and we kind of had planned for her to be our first guest. And I think the journey that it took to getting her on the podcast also speaks to community because there's so much understanding and I would say grace, but I think it's like, I think that's too, I don't know that that's the right word. I think it's just being really real with people in your life and letting them live their lives without, there's a difference, right? Like in our first episode on community, we talked a lot about being vulnerable. We talked about accountability that comes with your friendships and how we've experienced that. And those are all very true still. And there's also just the beauty of having these adult friendships where you can come in and out of one another's lives at different points, like, or just having an understanding that every friendship, every person that you connect with is going to be so wildly unique and they don't need to look the same. There is no rules or, or like, parameters of what it means to be like in community with one another. But one of the big things that I think going back to the journey to get Sarah on the podcast, which, one, the episode was so filled with wisdom, and Sarah just is this wealth of knowledge, not just on the topics like human design, hypnotherapy, just on in life. I think she's just a really interesting person to have conversation with. She sparked so many thoughts and ideas for me personally. But really about how everything is such perfect timing when you don't try to hold rules over people's heads or try to give them parameters of what
or
they, what,
deadlines.
yeah. And it's very different from the conversation on accountability. Like I think of accountability in friendships and really close friendships and in community is like you don't do anything to do that. You're in those friendships, you're being accountable to yourself more just as a result of this connection. At least that's how I experience it. And with Sarah, I think, yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of going on a tangent, but I just think all that to say that The conversation was so perfect and it was the perfect timing. Our plan was like, she's going to be our first guest. And she really, helped inspire us. And even just through your conversations with her about human design, how it kind of even sparked the conversation of Fifth Line Studio, which is kind of the basis for Karmic Mirror. And we both obviously have that shared fifth line in human design. And part of it is bringing ideas to the masses in our own unique ways because we have different, profile numbers aside from that. But really, really cool. So many things have come up recently on this topic. When you text me last night about, or voice noted me last night about talking about community, I was like, yeah, let's do it. I'm literally coming off of going to three different funerals in the last 3 months or 2 months, really. And through
Yeah.
that, so many learnings and things to reflect on as a result. So, where do you want to start?
Well, we already started. But with yours, I think I would love to touch back. Talk to me more about the accountability piece. What do you mean? What connects for you with the friends and accountability?
Yeah, because we talked about it in the very first episode on cultivating community that we recorded. If you haven't listened to it, definitely go back. I probably could re-listen to it. It's been a while now, but we
Mhm.
did talk about accountability in friendships and how, it could be as simple as surface level accountability, right? Like there's something that happens, um, when you're in relationship with someone, platonic or romantic, whatever, where I think you start to hold yourself accountable when you're in the right friendships and the right partnerships and the right community. A byproduct of that for me is holding myself to a new standard or holding myself accountable to things. So, for example, when I say surface level, I think about all the times where, we talk about on a regular basis things that have to do with our wellness or things that have to do with our emotional wellness or our inner
Yeah.
work. And just as a result of those conversations, or just as a result of my friend or me working on myself, it encourages the other. And we don't have to do anything. I don't need to tell you, hey, did you drink enough water today? Did you do this today?
Oh,
Right? There's this
yeah.
beautiful ripple effect that happens. And I think it goes back to one, cultivating the right kind of connections in your life and being incredibly discerning about who it is. From that very first episode, we talked about the concept of you are the average of the five people that you spend the most time with. And that's been a huge theme in my life in terms of being really discerning about who and where I give my energy to and where I receive. Even just purely physical, who comes into my home space, right? This is this beautiful, sacred, safe space that that I I really safeguard. And
Hmm.
and we used to, my husband and I used to be like, let's throw a party, let's do this. And over the years, I've just not even intentionally, or I would say not even consciously, I have started to feel like actually I do want to be incredibly selective about who comes into our home because I want it to be, let's say we are going to have a party or a dinner party. I'm going to be incredibly selective about who it is because I want the conversations to be rich and to be
Yeah.
connective. And I want people who can have healthy disagreement, even in a really nuanced way, because that's the kind of community that I am intentional about cultivating. And
Yeah.
so the accountability, does that kind of answer your question? I
It
think
does. It
that's
does. I
only like
was,
one dose, but I think it lends itself to so many other deeper layers, like of just wanting to, like I said, hold myself to a higher standard. When I spend time with people and with women who inspire, challenge, who maybe make me really uncomfortable because something about them, kind of churns my own friction of wanting to do differently or better for myself. They don't have to do anything but be exactly who they are. And I
hmm.
am inspired to, like I said, hold myself accountable to just being more than, or, I don't even know if it's more, but like really being that higher level of what I know I'm capable of.
Yeah. No, something in me just when you were saying accountability pinged that I just thought that's so interesting. Let's dive in deeper to what I wanted to pull more out of you in that. And I'm giggling just a little bit because you're like, no, what we talked about in our first episode. And I'm just like, okay, two line, like you can just pull that out. And I'm like, oh yeah, that is right. We did talk about that. So I think
Hmm.
I was forgetting about that. But yeah, it feels very, I think some of the things that were coming up for me when you were talking was one, yes, that beautiful who do you surround yourself with, the five people that you surround yourself with. And I think since that episode, the theme that I keep that keeps coming up for me is that you attract what's on your frequency and you repel what's not on your frequency. And that's been
Yeah.
quite a theme coming up this last year. And then, yeah, the example I would give is Sarah was we were going to record. We had an outline, we had everything recorded, and Sarah being an emotional authority projector and really just listening to her intuitiveness, it just wasn't the time for her.
Yeah.
And you think about all of the ripple of effects by someone really living in their truth and their authenticity, why it's so important to cultivate this community because one, it shows you and I, oh, we're allowed to speak our needs, right? And then it allows Sarah to speak her needs and kind of like you can keep ripple affecting it down, right? Like we give her
Hmm.
grace, we have patience, we have faith, and we understand that if that's meant to be, it'll come full circle. And I love the episode we recorded. And to your point,
Yeah.
exactly when it was supposed to be. But I think if we think of the opposite of that, there's so many ways that we could have blocked ourselves from getting to this beautiful connection and combination and could have from the ego coming in. It's like, oh, well, we've moved on. Too bad, so sad, like not aligned to have Sarah on. Or you could be like, oh, we just had Taylor on, who also speaks about human design. So maybe not enough room in our community for, but you and I really, what I think is so beautiful is maybe unknowingly, but one of our pillars for Karmic Mirror is that cultivating community piece. And I think you and
Hmm.
I just always talked about how important that was to this brand and to what we wanted to build. And I think where I just had this aha moment and this full circle after having Sarah on is again, there's so many pitfalls and places the ego could have taken over in that relationship and that community. And because you and I were so aligned and our values were the same, and because Sarah's on that frequency, we can just ebb and flow. And I'm getting the chills right now. And
Hmm.
look where we're still back at. We're still back at a place where we're excited to start thinking about how we can incorporate her more in the Karmic Mirror community. So that's really
Yeah.
cool. That was coming up for me. And then I want to circle back. Tell me, when I was talking about community, you talked about, I know that you've been to three local funerals lately. Why does that come up for you when we start thinking about community, or how does that impact your heart to let it come out when
Mm.
we're talking here?
Yeah, there was just so many common threads between these three people that passed away, and I spoke at the memorial on Saturday for one of them, and I will say this. Let me just preface: the three people that passed recently we're not relatives. I wasn't incredibly connected and deeply close, but in a different way, they were a part of our extended community. So one was a relative, a parent of someone that Keith is very close with. And the other two were a part of my Rotary community. So I think I talked about this in the first episode too. I belong to the Rotary Club. If you're listening and don't know what that is, you would be like everyone else in the world. No, I'm just kidding. Rotary is an incredibly huge organization, but especially globally. But it's a community service and global service organization. So the whole premise of it is service above self. That's the motto of Rotary is doing good in the world and in your communities. And so as a result of it, you get to meet these people and you know, the majority demographic of Rotary is older. These are people in their 70s, 80s oftentimes, and I'm definitely on the younger end. And if you're also listening and you're curious, look them up because one, service, community service organizations, people who are coming together to share and expand their resources to do good things in the world. They need younger people because it is, unfortunately, and I think this is right on the topic of community too, and I'll get to the memorials,
For sure.
but um, it's kind of a, for lack of a better word, a dying type of world, the clubs in
Mhm.
general. And what do we see also happening simultaneously is that people are incredibly lonely still. I don't
Yeah.
think that we have bounced back, so to speak, from the pandemic where people were wildly isolated. People went, I think that we haven't fully recovered. And I say we, I just mean collectively. You and I do things intentionally to be in community. I push myself to go outside of when I'm feeling like hermiting and I want to be alone because I am a person who loves my alone time.
Yeah.
But um, people are afraid, one, to spend time alone and be in their own energy because then you have to be with all of the things that you're
I
unhappy
was
about.
just listening to something about that the
Was it
other
Dr. Gaber
day.
Mate?
Yes.
I
Oh,
knew it. Of
wait,
course
you
I knew
sent
it.
it to me.
I sent
Probably
it to
you
you,
sent it to
probably.
me or something, but yeah.
Well, that's it. Well, you know what it was? It was Dr. Gaber Mate who was discussing, he was on the Mel Robbins podcast.
Hmm.
And they were talking about why people, and I think they were talking about her specifically, doesn't like to be alone because she has to be with her own thoughts and with her own energy. And he talked about what that really means is you just don't really like, you're not happy with yourself. There are things you want to work on, and that's okay. Like we're not
Maybe
here. We
not
didn't,
not happy with yourself, happy within yourself. Something's going on
yeah, yeah.
internally, right? That you don't want to look at. You're like busying yourself,
That's exactly right.
right? Yeah,
And so
yeah.
you have to get quiet. You have to be quiet when you're by yourself, when you're not distracting yourself, when you're not trying to be absorbed in scrolling or whatever the thing is. You do have to be like comfortable with silence, comfortable with your own energy and with the thoughts that creep in when nothing is distracting you. And so there is an element of that. And going back to Rotary. Um, these are literally the whole point of why I joined it was that if you want to do good things in the world, like give to organizations, like give your time, right? I think that what we see right now is a ton of, we see people post online, right? When you feel helpless and what's the easiest free thing that you can do? You can share something online, and that's wonderful. And it's kind of been a part of the current paradigm. But there are organizations like this that literally you put your resources together and you create things. We've created a community refrigerator with the library. We do all of these things in our community and you don't get paid for it. It's community service work, but
Yeah,
it
it's
shouldn't
beautiful.
fall on older generations because they're literally not around forever. So back to the memorials, all three of these men were like, and they were all three men and there's a whole other processing I was kind of doing that I won't bring here because I'm not done kind of unpacking my thoughts yet. But they were probably all, I would say, I want to say in their 80s and up, or they're around that generation, right? And so there were three common themes that I've been really mulling over that I just so connected between the three. And I have some examples that I've been thinking about because one, I realized recently how much I appreciate um, being the open emotional megaphone that I am, being in these spaces to feel all of this emotion from people. And there's something that happens when you're in these memorial spaces and you have their children and their grandchildren or people who knew them speaking. And you get to learn so much about a human being and how do you distill a life. And these three people just happen to be ridiculously impressive, which I think is, I hate to loop in the generation thing, but there is something very unique about this generation of person. Um, I don't know. It's different. It's just different. And like I said, I'm still unpacking it, but let me just tell you. One of them was like one of the world's, like one of the United States most celebrated child neurosurgeons. So you can only imagine the stories that people told about him. But what struck me most were the stories from his grandchildren and the ways that he went out of his way to stay connected and to stay instilling curiosity in them and just thinking broadly about the world in general. One of them was a writer who wrote like numerous textbooks and all of these stories. His favorite character was Archimedes. So I have this book about like mythology and mathematics that he gave me, which is really fascinating. And one of them was our village historian, but I think he did so much more than that. So, anyways, what I kept noticing as I was listening to people speak and just like taking in and receiving all of what the emotions of the space that I was in. Because, imagine, like I said, I wasn't deeply close with any of them, but I'm here crying because I am an emotion, I'm feeling the emotions, I'm reflecting them, projecting them back out. And it was really beautiful to be able to be in that space. But the first thing I noticed, that was the through line consistently overarching was that these three men who recently passed were wildly passionate, but incredibly skilled at nurturing community and connection. And it was in like their everyday acts. So, some examples. The one grandfather he used to write letters to his children in college or his grandchildren when they were in college on a consistent basis. Every time he'd find a newspaper article or something that he was into, he was very big on instilling philosophical conversations with his grandchildren to just like think broader and
So
just
cool, yeah.
explore nuance and different concepts and look at things from all angles. I mean, he was a famous neurosurgeon for children. So, needless to say, brilliant human being who has, like, I don't know, probably diseases and things named after him, not to mention halls and huge hospitals. But he would cut these clips out and write them letters, and then they would discuss it. And I like that just struck me so hardcore because I thought, wow, like how beautiful to have that relationship with your grandparent that you are discussing. It's not just the typical, and all relationships with your grandparents, if you are so lucky to have them, or not, or anyone of that, like a figure is beautiful. But I just was really struck by this because it was like this intellectual and emotional connection that they had with one another that so that was one example. Um, one of the people that passed away, he wrote nightly emails to his brother, to his children, just recapping his day. Hey, this is what went on today. Here's what I did. Your mother and I planted these tomato seeds. And I was really struck by that too, because when these things happen, you go to memorials, and I feel like if you're so lucky to receive everything that's all the love and the kind of honoring and remembrance that's happening and celebrating people's lives, you learn so much and you are inspired because I walked away from each one thinking, wow, I want to make more of an intentional effort to connect with my mother, with people in my life that I care about and go and it's not even going out of my way. It's just making an effort to nurture my community at another level, right? Like it goes back to the accountability. You know these people and then you are like inspired to hold yourself to a higher level of existence by like, oh, okay, I know that I don't live here alone. I don't know I don't do life alone, but how am I showing people that I am actually just grateful for this life and grateful for the people in it? Um, there was another one on connection that was really fascinating. Oh, the last memorial, the one on Saturday that I spoke at, and I spoke because of Rotary. And this couple, the husband that passed away, they are known to like be the welcoming people in their neighborhood. So anytime someone moved in, so one example that someone spoke, they lived in a historical home. Of course, he was a village historian and town historian. And someone moved in that was speaking across the street in another home. And he printed out a picture of their original like home from the person who built it and brought it over with like of course a bottle of wine, and they were just this, and then they nurtured these friendships for years, lifetimes of years. um and it just goes beyond that. I could talk about this forever because again,
Yeah, I
how
know
do
I've
you
like got
distill someone's
16
life?
bullets of things I want to circle
It's
back to
so
that you've
beautiful,
talked about.
and
Yeah.
that's just the one overarching theme. There were two others, but we'll talk about them later. But
Mhm.
that was a huge one for me was that they were all super skilled at nurturing community and making people feel seen
Yeah.
and cared for. And there were so many clear examples that literally I was like, if I could take a notebook out at this memorial and be like, I want to be a better neighbor, I want to do this. And I walked away from the last one and I was voice noting on the way home or giving myself a voice memo to remember these things because I was just so super inspired. But anyways, what are some of the things popping up for you?
So I think like circling back to when you had first started talking, you were talking about the Rotary and how Rotary Club and how they support the community so well. And I know through our relationship, I've gotten to see and hear about a lot of the ways that and what I love about it is that it
Hmm.
directly impacts the community. So that was cool. And then when you're talking about, you said younger people joining Rotary, what came to mind is like that diversity breeds
Hmm.
innovation. And I wouldn't only say, of course, there is age comes into play, but diversity
Yeah.
is full spectrum because just because I'm younger doesn't mean I am going to be able to build them a
Yeah.
website. You know what I mean? Like there's always we can contribute, but the innovative ideas, even just little things like, okay, we're giving the students tangible hard copy
Mm-hmm.
dictionaries, right? Like, is that 2023 or I know you throw out, what if we
Yeah,
give
yeah,
them
yeah. Yeah.
journals, right? So it's just, I think we do think about in community, I'm sure some of these organizations, and I'm speaking very broadly, why we need new members and why we need new people to communities because people are moving in and coming
Yeah.
with new, fresh ideas and really elevate and support more of the community. I thought that that was really cool. You had said something about like this generation and what was popping up for me, like something cool about this generation, and I know it's like very broad, but as you know, my
Hmm.
uncle passed, and he's of that generation too. And what was kind of coming to me was, it's this generation where they've seen a
Hmm.
lot historically, and I won't go through there. A lot of for my uncle, he immigrated over here. So you just think about all of the things he's seen that contributes to how they evolve and the what was the other thing about that? Oh, like because they just were so in community, they didn't have access to so much. So it's almost like all they knew was helping and supporting community. And when I was listening, I think I had shared with you, We Can Do Hard Things with Glennon Doyle, and they were just talking about when things get really hard, what do groups do? They
Yeah.
get back in community. And so some of those examples you showed were just really beautiful. And these are two other themes. And we're talking about, so you sent the silence thing this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
My friend went into labor, and I was really privileged and honored to be able to help out with her 3-year-old. And there were moments, right? Like I didn't have the Wi-Fi password for my laptop, and I'm like, I am certainly they are new with child. I'm not going to be. I don't need the internet, right? But I found myself in these moments of just sitting and
Mm-hmm.
in silence and I'm like, I know this. You're feeling really uncomfortable.
Mm.
Like, what do you need to do? What do you need to do? Because it's like a generator. I'm super quick. Like I can clean the house, and then that Virgo rising is like, we can throw the sheets in the washer, we can clean this, we can do all of this. So it still leaves me in this place where I'm sitting there just with this
Yeah.
silence. So that was another one when you threw that out at me. And then just really witnessing this community full circle of my friend having a child and me and her other dear friend being able to really support and help while they are tending to bringing this new, while mom and dad are tending to this new soul coming in. And where it brought me back to was my parents moving across the country. And it's almost like I didn't know any different because it was so programmed in me to offer, when she asked if I could help, I was like, yeah, of course, no problem. Because who did my parents rely on
Yeah.
when I was growing up?
Yeah.
their friends because we did not have family. We did not, it was not a phone call to grandma and grandpa saying, can you fly out here for a couple of days and visit? Because there just wasn't resources,
Hmm.
accessibility, all of those things. And so that really leaned back on community and why community is so important. And of course, just as like, I'm outside and the neighbors, wait, where are they? And getting so excited about them
Yeah.
having their daughter. And then, the neighbors coming over and bringing cakes and just bringing things. It just felt, I think that's why I messaged you last night. Something about community. We need to talk about community. And those were a lot of the things coming up for me. And it's just how these generations too, like build this community and what it might be. And unfortunately, I think we've lost a little bit of that connectedness for a lot of
Yeah.
reasons. But I'm really excited to see it. I'm getting chills right now, like see it coming back. And I'm really seeing it in my life, real time coming to fruition. So that's really
Yeah, yeah, I
cool
think
and
so
beautiful.
too. I think about um we met, I'm blanking right now on her name because all I can think of is her Instagram handle, which I'll plug as Happy Belly Hudson. It's we met her
Mhm.
through Tess, and if you live in the Hudson Valley, go check out her gluten-free goods because they're really, really incredible. But she shared something not too long ago to her stories, and it was like about the quote, "It takes a village," and I think I'll paraphrase, but it was basically like it doesn't take a village to raise a child. It takes a village to support a mother or to support, the family or I'm really paraphrasing it, and I loved that because that's the truth of it, right? Like, unless you are literally in I live in a village, but I mean in like a actual village elsewhere where maybe perhaps your child does kind of roam freely. I don't know that those exist. Maybe in a ashram or something where many people have a role, but truthfully, like it's, in so many ways, like the mother needs your support or, and deserves your support, whether it could be anything. It could literally be like, and I don't have a lot of personal experience with babies or anything like that, but it could be things like I need to go wash my hair, a few weeks in, I need you to hold the baby or whatever it is, or I need you to just wash my dishes or anything. I don't know. I'm throwing out just kind of basic examples, but I really loved that. And I also think she's such a cool person too. I'm gonna keep saying Happy Belly Hudson, but also I think that's totally fine because then you can go find her on Instagram. But also
Do it. They're at so many farmers markets. Michelle and I are blown away by their food. But yeah.
well, she runs the farmers market. I think they run the Hudson and the Beacon, or maybe they run the Beacon. I know her and her husband run one of them. But speaking of community, I really love what she's been doing. I think she's just somebody who really stays true to her own needs and to her own family unit and her own, well-being by just in the way that she runs her business. So if you go follow her, you'll catch on really quickly, and I'm really inspired by that. But I think that lends itself to community as well because, things happen, life happens, and I think we're in this space, and we touched on this in the first episode about the Aquarian age, and I think that we are seeing it more and more. And I'm so lucky to be in these, and you too, even in New Jersey where you live. But I think in these when you live in these towns where you get to know people around you, you start to see it blossoming so much more that there's this more, like we said with Sarah, it's not, and I keep using the word grace, but I think it's just having mutual understanding that not everything is business and yet at the same time we respect one another. Like when you have overlapping things, whether you're doing business with somebody or you're collaborating or you're just in community with them, having this really mutual understanding that things come up in your life and we can support one another in those ways in any which way, whether it's like just being understanding that people may have to cancel things or may have to, like, I don't know, there's this really interesting thing that
Yeah.
happens the further we get away from this like corporate type structure that the world operates on, in particular here in the States that we operate on, like we all just are supposed to live our lives as if we are a corporate company, when we will see
Yeah.
more and more in the future that people are breaking the mold, that people are looking towards more connective ways of doing business. People are bartering so much more around me. And I think that's such a cool way in community that we're supporting one another. I'm always thinking about interesting ways like, oh, you have this cool
I like
service.
trade services. I
Yeah.
know that's been coming up a lot for me
It's
lately too.
so
Yeah.
cool to witness, and it's just opening up the rules that we have been living within that just who made them, right? Like, I did not agree to those rules of like living life according to this weird corporate 9 to 5 pressure, or that everything needs to be so material transactional versus like energetically and emotionally exchanging.
And it limits our access to
Yeah,
things, right? And I'm just using this, I'll use the podcast as like a really simple example, but if we if we created a dynamic where it's 9 to 5 and you can only right, like, nope, Sarah, here's our availability.
right.
It is
Yeah.
10 to noon on
Mm-hmm.
Tuesday. Show up. Here's how your background has to look. We're recording
Yeah.
here. Here's the theme. No interruptions, right? She probably couldn't do that. She had a baby in between these
Yeah, yeah,
conversations, and so to be like, what time works for you? And if your children come in, oh well, we can edit around it, or maybe we include it in the podcast because
yeah,
moms are going to get
yeah,
it.
totally.
And why are we excluding? And when and that's the community thing, and a big theme too that I literally just got out a pen and started writing the other
Mm-hmm.
day, or not the other day, just last night, about how we can sew other people
Mm-hmm.
out of
Mm-hmm.
belonging. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But I know it's really important for you and I to just create this space where everyone in the community is welcome, because think about what we're missing out on by creating these barriers and these blocks for people to not feel
Yeah.
comfortable in that space. And we're highlighting Sarah a lot, but I think it's we wouldn't be able to give her wisdom and her
Mm-hmm.
insight to the world, just because she's a mom,
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah,
she,
yeah,
whatever the reason is, she's mom, she has another job, she's not feeling well, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
we just know so
Well, and
different.
it goes back to the sense of belonging, right? Like creating those rules or living within those rules and not wanting to, or not, or being afraid to just allow yourself to create the paradigm that you want to exist in, create the community that you want to be a part of. It's the total opposite of belonging, right? Belonging is literally come as you are and you are accepted. And I love that. I love that so much. Let me just get the other two themes out because I really want to mull on them. And I'm curious,
Okay.
like one, because I wanted to write about them, but I just haven't really yet. So the first one I said, is obviously community. And they are just there's such intention and there's such um, action. So behind these examples that I shared earlier, the other theme that I noticed from these memorial services that I was attending is that each of them were wildly curious human beings. And I love the talking about curiosity, it comes up in so many different conversations, but I always come back to the saying of curiosity and judgment cannot live in the same space. So when you are a curious human being and that is a value that you live your life by, and that's something I noticed among the three of them was that they were incredibly intellectually curious. They were curious about the world. They were curious about human beings. And what that allowed these three individuals to do was to live well beyond the limitations of what we think humans can accomplish in one lifetime because they were super impressive, because they didn't have these limitations on their worldview, because they just had a thirst for understanding and knowledge. And I was so struck by that. And the third theme, which ties into all of this, was that they were so generous with their Resources, fine. Yes, absolutely, because you see it in the work that they did with their energy, their time, but they were super generous with their knowledge. And all of those come back to community for me because, like I said, you cannot be curious and be judging at the same time. I can't look at you and judge the things that you do because, or if I am curious. If I am curious to know why someone operates the way that they do, maybe I don't get the answers and that's fine. But if I'm curious, I cannot be judging. If I'm curious about why I feel a certain way, I can't judge myself for feeling that certain way. Those kind of go hand in hand for me, and I really love that theme. It's also just how do you connect with people? If you are not curious, if you've already made up in your mind what someone's going to say, what they're going to think, or you know what their life is like, then you have no curiosity about them, and there's nothing left to learn. So then what do, right? And then you're just judging them based on your own preconceptions. And the generosity of spirit to me was so beautiful, and it really kind of brings it all together because there is something really beautiful. I have this channel or gate in my human design, and I haven't really looked into it for years now. But in my first human design reading, it's called the Gate of Innocence or something like that. And again, like I said, I haven't looked into it to dig further into the meaning, but I remember from my first human design reading with P the Fairy, um, also amazing on Instagram. Is that there's no real like there you just do things because you for like there that's the gate of innocence is like you don't really have any like real not that there's no intention behind why you do things, but there's just this innocence. So that to me that like kind of brought a little bit of clarity for why love and I thrive on being generous with my knowledge. I love to share things with people. I don't care if I like am only an Instagram friend with you, like we only know each other online. If I get my pause on your human design, like you better believe I'm coming through with some voice notes and I'm going to share that information because it lights me up. And so I really resonated with that because I think there's something really cool and connective, and you create these different types of connections. And maybe I don't see you all the time, but if we chat and and you're curious about something and I happen to know about that topic, I love to share it. And I think the more you do that, you find people who either are really, really resonate with that or also equally generous with their knowledge and their understanding or their energy. And I don't know, those were the three big themes that kind of like guided what I've been really mulling over lately and they all tie back to community.
Well, and I was thinking about and you brought human design literally when I thought about it. But I always, when I think about human design, at the root of human design for me is community because it's like this puzzle piece. If everybody lived in their authenticity, and it's that Aquarian age. It all like kind of comes
Hmm.
together in community and we live in our gifts and our strengths and like it's that puzzle piece. We would all come together, right? If we all shared our unique gifts and our insights, if we shared our intellectual knowledge, if we shared our financial abundance, if we shared a cup of sugar, right? It's just creating that energetic
Hmm.
exchange that continues to let everybody be abundant. A lot of times, the most financially, if you want to say like financially successful, meaning like I would assume the amount of money they
Hmm.
have, not that that's success, right? Because some people are so poor, all they have is money. But the ones that I see really fulfilled, continuing to manifest more, are the people that are overly generous. And I tell them all the time, they're like the most generous, thoughtful people, not only
Yeah.
financially, with their time, with their words, with their emotions, with, all of the
Hmm.
things. And that builds community. And I loved that. So when you were really talking about that community, curious, and generous, the curiosity comes back is I mean, isn't that how we should be building community, right? And it's okay. I'm not going to be everyone's cup of tea. Neither are
Hmm.
you. Not everybody is going to be a good fit. We can be good neighbors and good community members to each other, even if we don't fit. But how are we even going to see that if we don't get a little bit more curious? And I will go very like deep,
Hmm.
shocker, shocker here. But I just, these three. these past 3 days where I've really got to disconnect and spend time with my dear friend's 3-year-old, it became so profound to me where all I was thinking about with my time with him was this is a core memory for him. He's 3 years old and he woke up and his mom and dad are just gone and they're going to be gone for 2, 3 days and then this little baby's coming back. So think about how important community is and like even the neighbors coming to stop by, right?
Yeah.
We went to Wegmans and he's walking out with this It's a Little Girl balloon
Cute.
and everybody there just like so
Yeah.
thinking about what his experience is during these 3 days, right? It could feel like really simple, like get it done. But for me, I just always wanted to have that lens on this is really important. And I think community played a big part of that too, because even, when we're walking out of the store and I could just say, hey, bud, do you see how cool it is to be a big brother and
Yeah.
how excited when families grow, and even just moments where, oh, he's such a sweet soul. I'm sad. He could really name it. I'm just instead of like, it's okay, it'll be fine.
Hmm.
I just said, I get it. It's sad. What do you need? And even at like 3, he knew a tissue. It's like, okay, you feel that all out. But yeah, that
Yeah.
was just like a full round circle again of community and the profoundness of how much impact we have because as you and I know and we dig into those core moments and I'm not trying to be like, oh, look at I've prevented him from having, zero negative programming in his brain. It's not that. It's just about being intentional, being involved, being curious, being generous is how we support people
Yeah.
because we can make these souls journeys a little less difficult or traumatic, right? Big T, little t, whatever that might be. And that will help them grow.
Mm. Yeah, or maybe it's just, like yes, and I don't want to like not say that what you're saying is not true. I agree with you. I think that there's also just that I have like four different thoughts and they're not all connected. But one you were talking about, with this little boy and it goes back to our conversation with Tess. And I'm sorry if you just heard Toby burp in the background. That's my dog. He loves a good belch. Um, was when I express how I feel and when I share my thoughts, my emotions, a lot of the time, the natural reflex, and I think it's a conditioned reflex that many people have, is to go fix your emotions or tell you it's going to be okay. And we talked about this with Tess, and I think it's really
Hmm.
cool to bring it back up because um, this ties back to discerning the right connections for you. For me in my journey, I do not, I want people who are going to just validate or just be there for whatever I'm feeling. I don't want my emotions to be fixed because there's nothing to fix about them. I understand my process
Hmm.
of how I process emotions pretty well. And the more I surround myself with people who let me process them in the way that I'm meant to, the deeper that wisdom and the deeper my understanding of my own emotions gets, right? So like versus being like, whatever it is. We were talking not necessarily about emotions with Tess, but you were talking about intuition. And you were talking about how you knew something was happening and you were feeling it, you were dreaming about all the things. And then, what happens when you express it with the quote unquote wrong connection? They may rush to be like, oh, no way, no, right? And we can call that gaslighting, but I think that's maybe on an extreme level for your particular example. It totally was gaslighting, but that's not always going to be the case, right? I think gaslighting and narcissism are two words that we really throw out without fully understanding the depth of their meaning. But there are going to be clear
Yeah.
examples, like I said, with yours, that was clear. Um, that was a clear
I love that
example.
you're always just a good friend. We're not even talking about that situation, but you're like, no,
Yeah,
you listen to
it
me.
was
That
because, there was a lot of trying to invalidate your intuition, your emotions. But back to the community thing is like, the more you're aware of it and the more you learn, like, again, the more you know yourself. So, using my example of emotions, right? When I'm with people who who, you know, I can say, like, this is what's coming up for me. Chances are for me, I need to feel it. I need to let it go. But and I don't need to make up a story in my mind about it because it's just not how I'm meant to process emotions. And so when I'm around people who just let it be that, or just, you don't even need to say, oh, you're so right. You don't have to say anything. You can just be like, yeah, like I see that for you. I see what's happening. I think about when we started learning in our coaching program, right? Part of when you respond to someone's emotions in a coaching session without bringing your own stuff into it, it might even look like, hey, I can feel some frustration coming up for you. Does that land, right? Like, or I can see when
Hmm.
someone breaks down, like, hey, I can see this looks really frustrating, like, or whatever the feeling is, whatever you're mirroring back to
Yeah.
them. But you're not trying to change or fix. You're just letting the person work it out on their own. And that to me is such a
Yeah.
great gift of community and the right types of connections in your life is to allow me to do what I need to do and I allow you to do what you need to do, but I'm here. Like I'm in the space and you're not alone in it. There's something really powerful there.
Yeah, and I love the and I don't know where I picked this up from, if it was coaching or somewhere, but it's how can I show up for you
Yeah.
right now? And there's so
Yes.
many different iterations of that. Do you just need me to listen? Do
Yeah.
you want my advice? Do you want my opinions? And then that's giving permission back to them of how you can show up. And that's what I was thinking about. I
Yeah.
don't want to get you off track
Totally.
with your four
Well,
thoughts, but that came up for me
yeah.
of like how we can show up. And to like, what am I going to do? Gaslight a 3-year-old? Like, no, you're
You're
fine.
gonna be
No,
okay.
you,
He's like, I never said I wasn't gonna be okay, Aunt Allie.
it's like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I just woke up, my parents are gone. Like, I kind of get it. Like, there was no,
She's
they
been
don't have a
saying there's a
concept
baby coming, but I just,
of very what? Yeah. So it's like things like how many
yeah.
times we're saying, like, just how many more sleeps? One more sleep. But it's
Yes.
like, we do, but it's like, how can I show up
Yep.
for you? And as we know, like, with emotions, people just need to
Yeah,
feel
yeah, yeah.
that.
Well,
Feel it.
there's so much within the conversation of community, and I'm saying community, and what I really mean is like really discerning and cultivating the connections that are right for you. Um, but
Hmm.
all of it to me comes back to this like I keep thinking of self-trust and when I can trust myself, I can trust that you got yourself. Like, does that make sense at all?
Yeah,
there's something
yeah.
so beautiful about that. And I think because of this example, it's like if all of your life, every time you felt a certain way, someone in your life came to tell you, oh no, but it's going to be like this. And it's going to be like this, right? The first time that someone tells you that it's okay to just be and feel whatever it is, the how you're feeling, it's like, or the first time someone puts it on you, like, I don't know, what are you? What is it? Like, and doesn't trying to name the thing for you, it's like this crack open of like, oh, wait, actually, I do know, right? It's like with coaching sessions, always there's that moment or many moments, I should say, where you put it back on the client and you see that shift because then they're like, oh, yeah, actually, I am the only person that knows what is going on in my body, in my emotions, and I'm the expert of
Yeah.
this. And maybe for a long time, I have been made to feel that I don't know myself as well as I think I do, or I don't know what I'm feeling in my body. So either I've disassociated, there's many, many examples, many
Comes
reasons.
down to like, and where did I
Yeah.
learn that? Why do I think that? Who told me
Yeah.
that? Yeah, that comes down to the coaching where we can get to that core because it's
Yeah.
often not those examples, but yeah, we do a really good job of naming emotions. Someone shares an emotion or we visibly see an emotion in them, and we do a really good job, I think, as souls and human being bodies, is to name that as a
Yeah.
characteristic about a person,
Yeah.
right? Where it's like, you're allowed to be angry, right? Like that makes sense to be
Yeah.
angry. Now, maybe we didn't need to throw insults or physically hurt something or whatever, but does that make you a scary person? Does it make you a violent person, or are you angry? And I know maybe I shouldn't have gone with like the punching walls because
That's okay.
that's a little bit, but you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, or we can even use crying, right?
Yeah.
Like not because you're weak, but maybe you're so
Yeah,
frustrated. You're
yeah.
just crying, or it's like you just got to
I
get it
love that
out.
example because I think of, and maybe because maybe I'm like visuals of things that I've been watching, but think about what happens when you are crying and someone, that do you feel comfortable with, right? Gives you a hug and lets you cry. More times than not, you cry more because you're like, oh, I can feel it. I can release this. And I'm in this space that I'm allowed to go there. And I think that's the visual. The other thought, and I don't know where I
Yeah.
am, but maybe I lost them, but they'll come back if they matter. But the other thought is, I inherently have an understanding. This is a Venus in Virgo in my eighth house of other people's resources, collaborations, grief, mental health, and death. I have a real keen understanding that social connections in this life are inherently transactional. And I've said this many times before, like everything is an exchange. And I think it is easier for me to understand that because I'm here to understand that more deeply because of my placement, right? Maybe if you have Venus in Virgo in your eighth house, for if anybody's listening, pay attention to that. See what that shows you because one,
Can you elaborate when you say transactional?
everything is transactional, whether it's emotions, energy, and I don't mean purely, I think people think of financial or material when they think of transactional, but everything has a currency or everything has an energy about it, right? Like our conversation right now, we are exchanging thoughts and ideas. It's like a volley back and forth. There's an emotional exchange that happens as a result of the already transactional agreement that you and I have made to do a podcast together, to show up to one another. We agree to these kind of sort of terms in so many words, right? So like there's this real understanding of that.
Hmm.
And some of it comes from life experiences that maybe made, but anyways, where was I going with this transactional? But I do think there was something you were saying earlier. Um, but I think for me anyways, because that knowing just happens a little bit easier and everyone's going to have different things that come naturally to them because of their placements or whatever, their life experiences. Um, it helps me to see things in that way and not get hung up on the material sense that we are conditioned to put a label on, if that makes sense. Like I can understand that and think, yeah, of course, there is an exchange that happens. There's also this exchange that happens in our brains when someone, like, for example, when someone does you a favor, your brain is so wired to want to return the favor. That is transactional to me. It's the way our brains work. But the more that you can open up to like the different levels of what it means to connect with other human beings, the more that understanding of transaction expands. So, like to me, it goes also back to the accountability. Like, if I'm not thinking in terms of just dollars and cents, which is not the case at all, but there is a level of that, right? It's like entering into a marriage. There was a time in our history where marriage was business transactions, sadly. And not all of that has changed so wildly, right? In exchange, we agree to whatever our agreement is together. That's sort of transactional. And we agree to commit our lives in whatever way that we agreed on. There are the many different nuances that tangle into that, right? Depending on what roles you inhabit in your partnerships. Maybe, and just thinking back to our relationship, right? I agree to do certain things that work for my skill set and the gifts that I have, right? Which is why I love to do the visual aspect of Karmic Mirror because it's something that lights me up. You are a lot more Virgo minded and are going to get into the organizational and the analytical side of things. So it only makes sense that you do a little bit more of the logistic side of things when it comes to editing. And so it's cool to have this understanding and to not get hung up on it because I'm not meant to, right? Like that's just not what I'm here to do is get hung up on it. I'm here to just let it be and then try to show up in integrity and give back in that way. Um, and one more thing really quickly is you were talking about
Yeah.
Maybe if I say it, you'll remember because now I can't remember what exactly we're talking about. But I wanted to bring up the concept of capitalization. Do you remember this concept? It's
Mhm.
it's a it's a concept rooted in positive psychology, but basically the gist is when we are in a group setting or just you and we share positive emotions like gratitude, and we do it for at least the science is, and sorry if you hear the fire alarm, it's almost 12 o'clock where I live, and at 12 o'clock every day we have a fire alarm. Capitalization is literally shared positive experiences. So let's say we're in a group setting and we talk about gratitude and we share it. The science tells us that when we share that for an extended period of time, and it is at least 20 seconds is known, it has to be 20 seconds, this amplifies the positive emotions for everyone involved. But more than that, it strengthens social bonds. It also, there's science that it helps your well-being. And so I find that really fascinating because we talk about gratitude all the time, right? People write gratitude journals, etc. And that's a whole other topic because I think um, but when you do it in community, when you do it with other people, there is real research that tells us that not only are we amplifying the effects of the gratitude, but we're building a stronger connection with one another just by sharing those positive experiences and that gratitude with one another. And I think, on the topic of community, that,
I don't know if that came up for you. Was it coming up when I was saying like being in a meeting and crying? Was that relating back to that?
I don't know, but I have that open head, open ajna girl, so
It's
things
okay.
come in and they fly out.
Open head, open ajna. That's kind of happens to me, and I think that's why we can be in conversation because I'm like, no, no, I'm following. You follow me. It's like we write our
Yeah.
bullets and then we respond to all four. But we know who's meant to find us will find us. Thank you for elaborating on the transactional because I know we know what we're talking
Yeah.
about, but when I hear that word transactional, it just came to clarify it because I think we can often think about it as
Hmm.
tangible monetary, right? And there's just so many different ways to look at it. So I loved your
Yeah.
explanation.
Well, when you're not aware of it, right? Like if you're and this is probably most people because we aren't aware of it and some people are going to have, things about them or about their life experiences that will help provide some clarity whether you want it or not. Sometimes it's through like not great situations, but that offer you that moment of clarity to understand it. But what happens is, at least in my understanding of this, is that when you're not aware of this, like just inherent nature of things, of this exchange that is constantly going on around us, and between us, it causes so much stress or it can be so stressful, right? Imagine what life would be like if you're walking through and being like, oh God, like I need to get back to this person and I need to do this, right? Because there is something that happens unconsciously in our brain. Like I said, when someone does you a favor, your brain is going to be like constantly reminding it. It's like when you owe someone money, right? People say, oh, I forgot. And I'm like, no, actually, you probably didn't because your brain is actually wired to remember to
Yeah.
return the favor. And that can cause so much stress for you versus being like, okay, yes, this is a natural part of life. There's always a push and
There's
pull, a give and take, and I can choose to go against it and cause myself more harm and stress and anxiety over it, or I can start to adapt and live in the world, like in that way.
there's so much to that, right? Because it's like underneath that is also, do you have trouble receiving? What's your,
Totally.
what's your relationship with just being able to receive without guilt?
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't throw out there, I understand because I think people can use that as a manipulation tactic
For
or, maybe in
sure.
abusive, toxic relationships of the like, I mean, I've literally had an ex's mother be like, "Oh, you owe me big time for this one, girl." And you're like, "Wait, what?" You're like, "Wait, what?" You're like,
Yeah.
"I thought we were family. I thought this is exchange." I think, but to your point, why I think I'm lighting up a little bit is because I have really these last couple of months, as you know, abundance and what abundance means and doing the money work. And yes, we need money to pay bills. It's just like the system we
Mm-hmm.
live in. But what's been really cool is I've started to see these little synchronicities of where am I holding on too tightly to like
Yeah.
my things? Where am I not giving? Where can I realistically give?
Yeah.
And I've found myself as I'm like loosening, literally like loosening the grips on holding on to dollars or things
Hmm.
or whatever. You do start to see where it's like, oh, then that person was just like, oh, just keep the change on that, or like, whatever, I'm going to give you a couple extra
Yeah.
bucks. And you're like, I always tip. So, but I'm just using this as an
Hmm.
example, right? Like, that is something I will always tip, people when they're working and servers and things. But I know it can get really hard, especially when you're in scarcity of like, "Yeah, are they going to see that I didn't tip them on that little
Totally.
thing?"
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
And maybe that's an example that I use of like, I have always found the second I question, like, do you really need to today? Like, just you tip them. And I've seen that come back. Like, 2 days, someone buys my cup of coffee. Like, I ran into
Yeah.
a friend and they just insisted on buying my coffee. And you're like, well, that's saving way more money than the $1 you gave them on the $6 coffee,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, I love
And
your other
so,
example. Sorry.
nope,
You
you
finish.
go.
You told me recently about the gift cards. Can I bring that up? About holding on to gift
Mhm.
cards. Okay, there's the gift card thing and holding on to that energetically and then being like, okay, actually I have these, I can use these, but the real example, I don't know, that one came to mind, but the real example that I wanted to bring up was that you shared with me recently was about talk about transactional and associating it with money, right? I think something happened and I won't remember the details, but something happened and you wanted to give a gift to someone. You wanted to give someone something. And because it's very inherent, right? Gate 37 for you, channel of community and a friendship, I think is maybe the traditional term. I'm not sure. But then realizing that, like, there are other ways to gift people. There are other ways to be generous, and then you can be generous with your time and your energy. And it can mean so much more than if you were to go buy a thing for someone, right? Like,
Mhm.
and again, conditioning, because what are we so conditioned in this world? Like we're like, oh, we're in a, capitalist society. So we're always thinking about, oh, how can I use my money or buy something to show someone I care when that's just not the case. And it hasn't been for the existence of, human life. It just is where we live right now. But there are so many ways, like being available when your friend gives birth to watch their 3-year-old. Like that is valuable in so many ways that probably means more than if you were like, I'm going to buy you a baby gift, and maybe you do both, cool, but
Yeah.
like it just opens up. And again, curiosity, right? How else can I give and still stay true to who I am? Um, and not feel like I need to do it in a certain way. There are many, many ways that I can be generous in giving. I was reading this, I don't know what the traditional way to describe the gate 37 that you have. This is your strongest gift. And just to backtrack, is, in human design, from my understanding, we all have these gifts, different gifts, and they associate to
Mhm.
the channels and the gates within your human design chart. But each of us has one gift that is really considered like our strongest gift. And yours is the gift, gate 37, which is, I think, gate of community.
The way that helped me understand it is that it'll weave its way about like 70-ish% is you're using that gift as it's woven into all areas of your
Yeah,
life.
well, let me just read this thing that I pulled up, right? It says that gate 37 represents the energy of creating harmonious bonds through mutual support, loyalty, and emotional connection. It's about forming agreements and fostering a sense of belonging, often driven by a desire to care for and nurture others within a community. And I love this. I was
You're
reading
like,
it.
stop talking. I'm lit up about this
Well,
definition.
because I wanted to, because like I
I
won't
know, I know, I
understand the
know.
70%. That's a little bit more than my understanding right now of this gate. So I think this is a basic understanding is that like you are here to express this gift so effortlessly. And it comes back to like in the forming agreements. And it has nothing to do with anything material. It's about emotions and a sense of belonging. And that is the agreement. I'm going to show up and show and see you and make you feel heard. And that's my gift to you by expressing my natural gift. And as a result, the right person who receives it will feel belonging, will feel cared for, will feel nurtured, right? Like, isn't that a cool, I really love that.
It's so cool. Yeah, and it goes back to that if we put tangible things on that, right? And maybe I'll get a little emotional in this moment, but I think for my friend, like just I know how grateful her and her husband are. I
Hmm.
feel it. Like I just know. I know. And the reality of it is, and she can't stop expressing it, is that like she's just been such an important friend and she's like
Hmm.
really in my life and she has given her time and her grace and her love and her compassion. And if this is the one way I can continue to support. I'm like beyond happy to be able
Hmm.
to do that. And also, when we think about those gifts, the thing that was an aha for me is we don't realize these things are gifts because it comes so naturally to
Yeah.
us that we don't think it can be gifts. And so, even I mean, when I tell you that is just how my brain works. It's like do, like knowing my friend Jess, what'll be important to her, new baby coming home. I'm like, okay, disinfect, go around, disinfect the whole
Yeah.
house,
Yeah.
the knobs, the everything, like wash the sheets, get everything washed, just so that she can come home with a clean slate
Yeah.
and just like focus. And I know she's like, it's too much. Like you're too, and I was like, no, no, no. Like for me, I'm just like clockwork. It just, but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and then you throw in my generator and then I'm an acts of service love person too.
Hmm.
So even as I'm talking, I can feel that generator energy start to come up.
Yeah.
It's where I'm driven. And when they say generators, when you're in your flow and when you're in your hell yes, it's that energy for
Yeah.
days,
Yeah.
right? So it's not, I really loved doing that. So
Yeah.
I loved your reading too.
Yeah. Well, and you have that, you're an emotional authority too, right? So there's always going to be a layer of that consistent output of emotions based on your lived experiences that have nothing to do with the outside world. So when you talk about all of the ways that you get excited to care and nurture the people in your community, it's because you're also pulling from this wealth of emotions that are from your lived experiences. It's like, here's how I would want to be cared for and nurtured if I were in your position, right? Because it's from inside you. You're not pulling from the outside world when it comes to your emotions. And so you feel it so deeply in your body because you're like, and like this is how I would want to be treated, right? It's like the golden rule, treat others how you would want to be treated, right? That stands true for an emotional authority so deeply, right?
Yeah.
Versus like maybe a non-emotional would be like treat others how they want to be. I don't know. I'm just saying, but both are true. Both apply, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's really cool because think about in this scenario, what if she was like, I don't know, like I already have a baby too, so I've been through this in some way, but I don't know all the things, right? Like maybe her mind isn't going to like, oh, I would think about I want the sheets clean, I wanted this, right? So it helps to have that emotional authority of like, this is how I'm interpreting it based on my emotions of how I want to express my highest gift of caring for the people in my community, making you feel seen, belonging, right? Like, so it just all of those things kind of come together in that perfect, timing
And
and sweet spot.
it's such three line, which is so wild because my brain literally do, like so quick.
Yeah.
It's and I kind of love how you started with these pillars of what were the three lessons
Um,
that you
One that each of these people were really just so great at nurturing their connections and their community. They did it with their actions, with their words, their energy, but truly with their actions more than anything. They made sure the people in their lives were connected and then it was reciprocal. And the second was being super, super curious about everything about life and how that curiosity opened up their world. And as a result, the people in their lives were broader, were more expanded because of them, because of this curiosity. And again, like that saying that I live by, curiosity and judgment cannot live in the same space. And I really believe that ties back to community. And the last one was that they were so generous of spirit. And I say generous of spirit because it just rippled into everything. They had, I think. in these three people, there was that aspect of legacy. They left behind such legacy, not just because there are very tangible things in the world that exist because of the way they lived their lives, but because in the unseen ways, the way that their generosity left a mark on every person they interacted with, because they were just, there was no, and again, back to the transactional aspect, right? Like just because you acknowledge it, because just because you're aware of it, doesn't mean that anything changes. If you are generous of your in spirit, if you're generous with your knowledge, with your energy, or with whatever it is that you have that you feel excited or called to be generous with, you don't ever have to worry about the reciprocation because it will always come back to you, just like you said with the coffee, right? Or the tipping or whatever. Once you are aware of it, you don't have to stress about the transactional nature of life and the exchange of emotions, of energy, of whatever the exchange is. You can just let it be. And then you're free to be super generous because you're like, oh, yeah, I don't have to worry about anything coming back to me. I know and I trust. And back to the self trust, I can trust
Yeah.
that if I stand true to who I am and I give out of the purity of my heart, I give because I can, because I have no intentions other than just to be to share my excitement, to share my hunger for or the zest for life with others or the people I care about, um, it will always come back around. And I can trust myself to do that. I can trust the universe. I can trust God. I can trust people in my lives. It's such a cool, everything becomes so naturally like you're no longer thinking about the exchange, but it's more of a flow. It's that, like you said, like the ebb and flow because things are just constantly moving and circling around you and through you.
And there's so many easy ways. I think, well, one, what came to mind, and I think I'm going to keep going, and I know you could keep going.
Mm,
Maybe we're on this hour mark and we
yeah.
close with the legacy of these three men, because what was really coming to mind is these, when you were talking about the legacy that they left,
Hmm.
it's not just a financial legacy, it's not just a tangible, you know, property that's passed down around,
Yeah.
throughout the
Yeah.
generations in that family. Here you and I are sitting talking
Yes.
about how you witnessed these men live their lives and the takeaways from it. And so
Hmm.
their legacy does continue to live on. And one of those legacies is community.
Yeah.
I mean, we've sat here and literally talked about them and examples, and that really feels that community, curiosity, and generosity.
Yeah.
I think that's what I'm taking away from me
I
from
love
here after
it.
this conversation.
Yeah, I love that. Do we want to? We didn't come up with a self-love check-in. I had some random questions I had pulled. I didn't know if any of them applied, but I did have this question of what kind of legacy are we building through our actions and through our relationships? I don't know if anything pops up for you. I don't know if I have an answer yet, but I thought I'd throw it out there.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And I just got a little, because I was literally thinking about it is that treat others as you want to be treated, but like a big theme for me, what came up is as an emotional authority, I've been doing a lot of ancestral parental
Yeah.
stuff, and I just had this really cool thing where when you were talking about the emotional authority earlier, one thing that always just sticks in my mind that my mom has always kind of instilled in me is be kinder to people than they are to you.
Mm-hmm.
And while you and I know that maybe that has set me up, maybe not for the most easeful of situations, maybe that
Mm-hmm.
has caused me some pain, and I've been manipulated that way, but I just really am building this community. It's just that focal point of like, how can you be kind to people without them giving you things? And so I have started to feel this lightness. I've started to feel abundance more coming to me,
Yeah.
even by just I mean, Michelle, there's little things, sometimes there's like those hard lefts to get off of a road or a hard right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I will, if there's not a lot of traffic behind me, I will just stop and let cars go. I will always let cars cut
Yeah.
in when having a trouble. It's just like little things like that. If I see someone struggling, or like, yesterday at the park, there was a grandmother and,
Yes.
their granddaughter wanted to get on a swing and she couldn't pick her up. And I'm like, I'm happy to help if you're comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm.
Like those are the energetics of just, so that's kind of the legacy and the takeaway that
Yeah.
I hope people always kind of remember me or tell stories about me of being kind and just
Hmm.
being kind. And it was kind of neat when I was walking away after the park yesterday too. It was like a little validation because I'd just been running so quickly. I think the mother came and the grandmother, I heard her kind of being like, that was just so nice and that was so sweet and she
Yeah.
had so much fun. And it's not to bring it back to me, but it's just, you see as you're talking about these three men who have left their legacy, right?
Hmm.
Like that's a legacy of this grandmother being like, "Oh my gosh, the granddaughter had so much fun because a woman in the park helped lift her up on a swing when I
Yeah,
couldn't."
yeah.
So it doesn't always have to be these big things that make a ripple of
Yeah.
impact.
Well, gosh, two things pop up when you say that, right? Is one that going back to like people feeling isolated and alone. And we own part of that. Yes, something really wild and life-altering happened in the world collectively that we had to experience for a few years that changed the way people interact with one another. It changed so, so much about the way we live our lives. But also, when I say we own it, like we get to decide to go when we leave our home or when we go online or whatever it is, we get to make the choice of whether we're going to live in that isolation or we're going to open up and see the people around us that we're not the only ones that exist, right? It's like when we say remind ourselves like, okay, I am a speck of starlight on
Yeah.
this big, huge world. I am equally special and unique and valued and important as much as I am this speck. And so I can choose to be a part of this world and I can choose to walk outside and make eye contact with someone on the sidewalk, or I can choose to stay in, that I don't want to see you and I want to continue to, like we get to make the choice and whatever you do, it's your prerogative. And also, if you're objective and your heart wants community and connection, you don't need to try very hard. You can literally, like I said, you can make eye contact. You can see people who need help. A grandmother needs help on getting her grandchild on the swing, or you're going on the subway and you see a million people pass a woman with a stroller going up the stairs. How often does that happen in New York City, right? Like, and you could choose to take 2 minutes to help the person, no expectation, right? Like there are millions of little instances where you can choose to see the world around you and connect with it, or to choose to stay within your own isolated world. And whatever you do, like I said, it's your choice and there's no right or wrong. It's just what does your heart want? What does your heart need? What do you want out of this life? And how are you going to show up and act like you want it? Like that's what you want.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
wait, I'll remember my thought. Okay. Um, we're like, who can remember their thought, but without
We
losing it
are we
better?
are real-time learning
Um,
that
okay.
I like to ask questions and Michelle can lose thoughts. So we are real-time learning. I am three-line learning
We
here.
do, we do.
Okay, you go.
Um, when you were sharing about, the being kinder than people are to you, I thought about what we've said a few times that I think I heard this on the Day Luna podcast, I think, is that one of the maybe I did, regardless, that the biggest life lesson for a generator is to learn how to give to others without losing themselves. And I bring this up because the community conversation, I think that one of the things that has been happening in your life is that you are opening up and allowing yourself to be in the types of spaces and around the type of people and community who will allow you to be who you are, to be kinder than the other person, or to be whatever that is, right? I'm using those words, but to give generously, to live and activate or express your gate 37 of community and not take advantage of it. People who are going to see that and value it and really, really treat it like the gift that it is. Does that make sense? Like, and
Yeah.
something really cool is like shifting for you and for everyone in the world and all different times and all the things. But I'm just speaking to our
Well, it's
personal friendship,
everyone, but it is really cool to see
right?
it in real life. And you
Right.
mirror it back to
Mirror
me.
back, right? Because I see it where how painful and how frustrating can it be to know that your greatest gift is to create win-win situations, to want to make people feel seen and nurtured, to be a generator who's lit up by nurturing your community, and then to not have that either received or mirrored back to you, or oftentimes maybe even I say taken advantage of, but I don't think it's that. I think it's just not seeing it and not valuing it. And oh, and then what happens when you shift into the right type of communities or the right connections with people who just value it. It's a gift for a reason, right? Like it's your highest gift. We all possess different, gifts in different varying ways. But when you're in the right spaces of people who see it and value your gifts, it's just a different experience entirely because you can truly step into it fully, or you can express it without fear and you can be vulnerable. It's just such a cool thing, right? That's the give and take. That's the transactional of it all is like, oh, I get to show up and give you my highest gift unabashedly, unapologetically. I get to just be the person I am, express myself in this way, and you're going to receive it and you're going to mirror back to me whatever it is you're going to. But the point is that I feel really, really safe and to do this fully, to express myself in this way.
Mhm.
It's really cool. Anyways,
And that's the kind of discerning, though, is in
mhm.
that that's the work that we get to continue. I hate to even say work, but it's like where we get to continue to live because as many things,
Yeah.
I wish there was like one root cause, but thank you for sharing that insight. It's always so helpful because yeah, it's not the majority. The majority
Yeah.
of people aren't taking advantage of it, but
Yeah.
like
Taking advantage is like maybe too strong, but I think it's a difference of being seen and valued for what it is and
well, listen,
all the
people have
things.
definitely
We won't go there.
there are a handful of people who have I
Yeah,
mean, I think romantic relationships, there have been
for
relationships
sure.
where people take advantage of it. Now, we're not going to get into whether they intentionally did that or not on this episode, but I definitely hear you on
Yeah.
that and where I was going with it, but it might come back.
Yeah. Well,
Share with me what was the did something come
mm.
up for you of how you might answer that
Yeah,
question?
what kind of legacy are we building through our actions and relationships? You know what? The number one thing that comes up for me is about self-acceptance and self-trust. And I think I say that because so much of my journey is about giving that to myself and knowing and trusting that the more I accept myself, the more I trust myself, the better I can accept others, but the better I can trust the people in my life. And that ties back to receiving, that ties back to being vulnerable, right? Um, and this can ripple into so many different paths and thoughts or thought streams. But, like, for example, in my relationship, it is so much freer and easeful to trust in my partner and trust in our relationship when I trust myself and when I accept aspects of myself, when I accept that I am not where I want to be or in certain areas, but I'm right where I need to be. And when I accept that I don't know all the answers, or I accept that there are going to be things that people in my life are more skilled at, more gifted at, more knowledgeable about than I am, and I can receive that from them versus having this wall up of like, no, I need to know it. I need to figure it out myself, right? Like there's this beautiful, and there's Toby in the background. Um, there's just this beautiful give and take that happens when you give to yourself first, when you give yourself acceptance, when you give yourself trust. And I think when in terms of legacy, that is so important to me because like nothing else matters. Like all of the other things in life, everything is so small when compared to this because and not small. I mean, I hope that people understand by now, like we're not there's only so much time in a podcast. You can't just like go explain yourself out of everything. And I think that's part of community is like and acceptance and trust. You can just be you and you don't need to explain why, what, all the things like come as you are, and I'm cool with it, and vice versa. But truly, legacy wise, like, yeah, if we cannot accept ourselves, we can't love ourselves. If we can't trust ourselves, it's hard to trust other people. If you can't trust yourself and other people, how do you trust the timing of the universe? How do you trust the opportunities that are coming your way that are right for you, right? Like there's so many deeper layers to that. So I think through my actions, through my relationships, it does come back to this ability to accept myself, to be curious without judgment and to trust that, the timing, the placement, all of the things.
I love that. And I think that you've been a really good example for me on that. And I think what I've found is in community. people who show up that way allow me to show up that way. And it's almost when you were talking, when looking at, because there will be certain situations where you're like, this person did this and it bothered me, and this person did this and it did not bother me. And when I think about it, it comes down to that intent. And that, I don't know why that was coming up when you were talking of like when we build community and when we build relationships where we just we're curious enough to assume positive intent. And when, you have self-love and you have it, you're able to give it off, right?
Yeah.
And that's almost like I look at that coming full circle, how you've given me more permission to have that with
Yeah.
myself.
Hmm.
And then we keep going and we see how our relationship has continued to evolve and be easeful and, honest and transparent. And I think that's a badass legacy
Yeah, right?
to consider and think about. Yeah, for
Totally.
sure.
How do you want to end? This has been great. We didn't really have an outline and yeah, it's fun. It's good. It's hopefully, we listen back and it feels as good as it does now, and we can continue on this kind of like more open type of format because that's what the voice note files has really been for us. It's been like unfiltered voice notes that we've taken into the podcast episodes, but in a little bit slightly, I won't say filtered, but
Yeah.
maybe a more organized way. And I think we're starting to bridge the gap between the two, which feels good. And again, comes with comfort with time that comes through connection and community and curiosity
Yeah.
and being generous and all of the things that we've learned, which is just so lovely. And yeah, this has been great. I'd be so curious. I want to hear more from people, anyone who's listening. By the way, someone sent us a DM, and I don't know if you saw it on Instagram, but someone sent us a DM and said, and it was totally unexpected, but from another country, and said, "Hey, I came through to listen to your podcast through a common friend. Amazing talks. Finally found what I feel I am not alone in this world. Like I always thought I was weird recalling my dreams." From the dreams episode, unexpected. Of all, I enjoyed very much the podcast with Stephanie Pereira. It so resonates with my soul. Thank you so much. Keep up with the good work in spreading this. Um, and I saw that it was in our like requested folder, so I responded late because I didn't see it coming through the primary. And so I saw this like maybe yesterday. Yeah, just yesterday at 3 o'clock, and they sent it on March
Mm.
17th. So I was a little late to respond, but how cool to get this kind of message. It's so beautiful. And when I read it, I was like, well, I knew I was going to see you today, so I was going to talk to you about it anyways and tell you in case you hadn't seen it, like
Yeah.
I hadn't seen it. But it just continues to affirm, right? Like you and I, through this whole path, haven't been so focused on like metrics and who's listening, right? Because again, that's not why we set out to create a podcast, wasn't to say like, we want to make money and we want to have viewers and blah, 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 blah. And like, yeah, if all that comes or when it all comes, fantastic, right? Like you
Dear
said.
universe, we're not saying no to all of those things.
Well, yeah,
We haven't built this brand, this podcast, what's to come on intentions of that. We
yeah,
weren't trying to say, here's how we're going to become millionaires.
yeah,
We really were thoughtful. And it's so cool because one of those pillars was community
right.
always
Well,
from the
because this feels
onset.
like energetic currency to read that message from someone that we don't know, that
Yeah.
isn't in our personal like connections, right? Because it's one thing to feel supported by the people in your life. Like that's so cool. Tom, hey Tom, shout out to Tom at the Millbrook Antique Center is like our number one like podcast listener.
We love
And
Tom.
constantly, like telling me when something resonates, and that is energetic currency to me because it feels very valuable when you read these words from people in your community or people who you don't know sending you a message on Instagram. You're like, okay, wait, I feel very rich in this moment. I feel very rich with emotions, with good vibes, with feelings, with great energy, and also just validation. And that's such a amazing, amazing thing. So I'm really happy I remembered to read that to you
Yeah.
as we close out this episode.
Well, I heart you, Michelle. Thank you for being a big part of my community. And thank you
Girl.
for all of our community for letting us name drop a whole bunch during this episode. Without further ado, until next time, Karmic Mirror listeners,
Bye, everyone.
thanks for tuning in. If you resonate with today's conversation, connect with us on Instagram at Karmic Mirror Podcast and send us a message.
And don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen. And if you're loving Karmic Mirror, we'd appreciate a glowing review or a share with someone who could benefit.
As we close, remember, life is not a one-size-fits-all approach. How are you honoring your unique path? Stay curious and always be kind to yourself. Until next time on Karmic Mirror.